Hello, you wonderful Connect groups. I wonder if you have ever been in a meal that has been very awkward. Maybe someone has stormed off in this meal in anger or embarrassment. Maybe somebody has said something absolutely outrageous and there's an awkwardness around the table. Maybe someone has thrown something across the room or at somebody during the meal. Maybe somebody has been silent all the way through the meal. Or maybe somebody has just taken all the food and left none for others. I'm sure you can think of lots of different scenarios where you're quite happy that a certain meal is over. Well, it has all the more impact in that context, doesn't it? Because a meal is supposed to be a place and a space where relationship is grown and love is shown. And this meal that you've just read is full of awkwardness, this particular part of it. Jesus has just washed the disciples' feet, which is not a good start for feeling very comfortable in a meal, especially with your master, the one that you've been with for 3 years, who you love and admire, has now washed your feet. And now Jesus throws a bomb of a statement into the meal. One of you is going to betray me. Well, imagine how that would have gone down. Of course, we know this person is Judas. So we're asking the question, how does Judas in this situation fit into our theme of the year, which is love one another as I have loved you? As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples if you love one another. How does that fit into this dynamic of the Father loving the Son loving the disciples loving one another, and where we are today? Well, Judas is a very complex character. He didn't want to be loved by Jesus in the same way that Jesus was loved by the Father. He wanted to be loved by Jesus by having him facilitate his expectations about what this Messiah should look like. Submission to Jesus and his agenda was not part of Judas's agenda. His agenda involved the love of money, the expectation of a very earthly kingdom in which he could play a significant part. Washing other people's feet was certainly not his style. And now, as we looked at last week earlier in verse 2, the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. So Judas had come to this meal, and he was playing at fellowship. By this point, he had already determined in his heart that he was going to betray Jesus. He was pretending to be united to Jesus and the disciples. And we've just had Jesus wash the disciples' feet, and we've got this interesting comparison between Peter and Judas here. So Peter says, "You're not going to wash my feet." Jesus says, "Yes, I am. Otherwise, you've got no part of me." Peter says, "Well, in that case, my head, my hands also." And Jesus says, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you." So Jesus knows what Judas is up to. Judas had let Jesus wash his feet, but only in order to fit in, not in order to let Jesus serve him and learn what service looked like. The great irony here is that Peter wanted to be part of Jesus so much he asked for his head and his hands to be washed too. Jesus said he didn't need a bath because he was already clean. He's already in relationship with Jesus. Judas needed that bath that Peter was asking for. He needed cleaning, but he didn't ask for it because there was a different agenda going on in Judas's heart. And Judas fit in so well. No one suspected him. Now, an almost comical scenario takes place if it wasn't for the fact that this was such an important issue, where after Jesus drops this bombshell of "one of you is going to betray me," the disciples are looking around saying, "Well, I know it's not me. Who is it going to be here? Jesus has said it, so let's find out." And you can almost imagine the sideways glances, and finally Peter's looking over at John and is like, "John, you're lying next to Jesus. Ask him quick." Trying to not let people see, trying to get the information. And you've almost got this John kind of, "Yeah, okay, I'll ask him." And he's leaning back on Jesus and he's kind of, "Jesus, so who is it? Tell me, come on, you know it's not me. Who is it? Because Peter wants to know. Well, Jesus answers. He says to John, "It is the one who I'm going to give this piece of bread to when I've dipped it in the dish." Then, dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. As soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered into him. So Jesus told him, "What you are about to do, do it quickly." You might think this is really weird. You've got to understand the context here. It's not kind of Jesus saying, "One of you is going to betray me." John says, "Who is it?" Jesus says, "Watch," and gives it, and everyone knows. The meal's going on a little bit. John has asked the question, and this expression of fellowship here, where you almost not feed one another, not like lovers with the spoon or the fork with the spaghetti on it, but in the culture of this fellowship and a shared meal, you as an expression of love towards one another and fellowship, you would take some of the food and offer it to somebody else, saying, "Here you are, I see you, I recognize you. This is the great common denominator, the food that we're eating. We're on the same level here. Let me express something towards you by giving you some food." Jesus is doing that and letting John in on the secret. And one of the most dramatic verses in the Bible, I think, is found here in verse 30. As soon as Judas has taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. It was the hour of darkness, where dark deeds would be done from the darkness of the heart and for dark reasons. Now, in this encounter that's recorded for us in this narrative, in loving the church and in loving one another, fellowship and unity is of paramount importance to Jesus. So much so that he is willing to call out Satan's agenda in our hearts and in our fellowship when he sees it. He is willing to challenge it head on, especially when it is actively hiding behind apparent godliness, apparent service, apparently good motivations, and people who even hold important positions and roles in the life of community, like Judas did looking after the money bags. And in the perfect way that Jesus does these things, he calls out this in the most loving way, in the most loving context. It was a meal in which he had served his disciples, and through an overt offer, an expression of fellowship in passing that bread to Judas. Judas couldn't cope with this kind of love that challenged the motivations of his own heart. It was interestingly at this point Satan entered the heart of Judas, and the decision then was made to go and do what he'd already decided in his heart and planned to do. It's interesting to note, isn't it, that after Judas had left, it was only then that Jesus then continued to go on and share the communion part of this meal with his disciples, taking the bread and the wine and saying what it represented in his body and blood in the new covenant. Well, with this in mind, let's have a discussion. What about our situations, our fellowship, our church, the church in general, Christians that we have fellowship with? Maybe we can talk now about how challenging the love of Jesus towards us is. How when Jesus loves us, he exposes the motivations of our hearts and he brings out and exposes what's in us. Maybe we can talk about how meals are a place where love can be worked out towards one another despite the awkwardness that sometimes accompanies it, especially in those fellowships where some things maybe we're not quite understanding or knowing each other, what a meal will do to each other. Maybe we can talk about how we practically and lovingly maintain boundaries so that those who love Jesus and those who don't yet love Jesus can sense where true fellowship begins and ends. This encounter and this interaction is there on purpose to show us how Jesus loved his disciples and how Jesus loves us and how we are to therefore go and love one another. There's more in the passage, I'm sure. Perhaps you can bring it out. Put it under that banner and that theme of our vision verses for the year. And bless you as you have fellowship with one another and love each other, pray for one another and encourage each other, pastor each other and we'll see each other very soon, I'm sure. Bless you all.